Hello and welcome to our 10th session where we are going to speak about project management and planning. In our previous 9th session, we explored some of the basic concepts of programming skill by building a driver simulator game. Now it is time to build our own game from scratch. So this is your very first planning session where you will begin working on your own personal projects. Unlike the prototype where we are working on the same type of project together, in this session, you will be working on your own project, which will be completely different from what I am doing. You have the great power of coming up with a unique concept for your project. But as you know, with great power comes greater responsibility. You are responsible for making sure you actually finish it. You need to take time to think through your idea and plan out how you will get it done. So by the end of this session, you will have completed a design document for your project, including an outline of the concept and timeline for completing it. Here is the tricky thing about coming up with a concept for your project. On one hand, you want it to be unique, amazing, and like nothing the world has ever seen. On the other hand, you want it to be complete and functional and playable. You want all of these things, but unfortunately, they are kind at odds. Now, don't get me wrong, it is possible to create a unique, amazing project like nothing the world has ever seen that is also complete, functionable and playable. But it would just take a lot of time. And I don't mean hours or days, I mean years. And maybe not just the years of your life, but years of other people's lives. To make some of the console games you might have played before, it can literally take hundreds of people, thousands of hours, which means we are talking about hundreds or thousands of human hours to make some of these products. So given that, the trick here is to figure out how much time you have to dedicate to this project, then striking a balance between uniqueness and completeness to get the best possible outcome. Here are the 2 tips of how you can do this. First, in this session, as you create different prototypes, you will learn how to program a ton of awesome different features. So why not build on those features that you already know how to program instead of having to figure out everything from scratch? The second thing we will do to make sure we actually complete what we set out to do and not to try to make it fully featured, production ready or highly polished product. Instead, our goal will be to make a minimum viable product, which we can call it as MVP. A minimum viable product is a version of your project that has enough features and looks good enough to satisfy early users, allowing you to get feedback for future development. So, in completing this design document, recognize your time constraint, build on the features you have, and aim for an amazing minimum viable product. Now, let's start creating. Welcome to our lab where you will be working on your own personal project. Now, personal projects are designed for you to work on your own with less instruction. So, it's a chance to create a project that you really care about and you can really be creative with it to make whatever you want. There's a great opportunity to apply and solidify the skills that you learned in the lessons and in the challenges. Let's take a look at my personal project. So I have created this endless running game where we have a deer being chased by different animals and obstacles like rocks. Our screen scrolls endlessly and the whole objective is to last as long as possible, collect different hearts and trying to stay alive, and then we can even restart the game to try again. Now these personal projects are designed to be built on top of all the different things that you learn from each individual unit and each individual challenge. Consider prototype 1 where we learn how to create our first project and we really get to learn a lot about player input that we can apply in our challenge. And so we can have our player move the vehicle around using the arrow keys and to move forward and backward. In our second prototype, we will get to learn about the basic gameplay. to be able to create all these animals that spawns down the scene. We even get to learn about how we can spawn obstacles and projectiles based on the player's input, and learning a little bit about collisions along the way. In our third prototype, we take our project a little bit further with sound effects and animation to make our game really cool. Look at that jumping animation. This farmer is so excited running through the forest, and then we can collide with these different obstacles, create this huge puff of smoke. In our fourth project, we will get to learn about the different gameplay mechanics, the power-ups. So we need the power-ups increasing the difficulty. So we need to avoid these enemies, spears coming at us and stay alive. Get these power-ups so that we can bump them away if we need to, and then eventually make the power-up go away, until finally we can bring all these different parts together to be able to make a full game with really cool effects, with nice user interface, able to set difficulty states, interact with different objects, accumulate score, and even lose the game. Now the goal of personal project is all focused on two things: the completeness of our game, so how much of what we actually completed in what we intended to finish, and then the creative or applicable ways that we made our game. So how much new things did we learn or add to our game to either work really well or look really nice, and then did we apply the skills that we learned to be able to make something that's our own. Now these two things are always in constant balance of each other, and so at some point you have to decide when your game is exactly what you wanted it to be, but also it's good enough to share it with other people. So taking a look at what I set out to do with my own personal project, I have this handy design document that helps to outline the different minimal things that I am trying to complete, known as a minimum viable product. Now at the end of the day, my game definitely could use a lot more work, but to see where we started off with, I wanted to create a game where the player could control a deer in a top-down style game using the arrow keys to move the player in a bunch of directions around the screen. For my gameplay, I wanted animals and obstacles to appear from the top of the screen, and the goal of the game was to avoid crashing into different rocks or being eaten by foxes and getting bit. For the sound and effects, I wanted sound effects to happen when I bumped into other animals, if I crashed into a rock, or if I get bitten by a fox. For the particle effect, I want them to pop up whenever I crashed into a rock, and then I wanted to hopefully get a scrolling background to make it look like all the animals are running really quickly. For the gameplay and the mechanics of my game, I wanted the game to progress whenever waves of foxes bit the player and attempted to attack, so that it made the game a bit more difficult to stay alive. I also wanted to put in the heart that appeared so that the player could regain their health back. In terms of what I wanted the user to experience, I wanted their lives to decrease whenever they were hit by rock or bitten by a fox, and then at the start of the game, we would have our deer title screen that would appear and our game would end when the player ran out of lives. There's even other additional features, which is the point where you can kind of stretch your ideas and your imagination to see what you can do. Some features that I wanted to add so that people would bounce off to large animals, make it harder to control the player, and avoid all the obstacles that are in our game. Now, with this minimum viable product that I wanted to complete in the design document that we provide, there will be a timeline to help outline the things that you want to accomplish every day, every week, with the different features that I want you to add to your game. So you can see in my outline, I wanted to set up my camera, and then I wanted to move the player, and then I wanted the objects to spam randomly. I added in some collisions. Eventually, I moved away from just having these primitive spears and cubes on the scene, and I replaced them with the actual assets that I could use to make my game feel a little bit cooler. After that, I added in some of the different gameplay pieces like health and game over. After that, I polished my game up a little bit more, adding in some of those particle and sound effects, that scrolling background and that music. And then if I was able to, I would add in different power up objects to make the player jump or to save the high scores of all my different players. So you are trying to get to a point with your project where your game will have to be just enough to be fun and be enjoyable, but also give you opportunity to get feedback from other people like your friends or your family, your teachers, your classmates, so that you can further develop this cool little project you have made and make it even better. At the end of the day, you are not trying to create the best or the flashiest project. You are just trying to make something that works really well and feels really nice to the people playing it. Now, one major thing to note for this project, there will be a lot of temptation to really go above and beyond with this project, making it look incredibly amazing. But that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to be able to do. So don't go and try and make the biggest or the best game out of your different project, because for now this is just the first project. So try and stick to what you are learning. Apply what you have learned in this project and develop something that you can feel proud about at the end of the day. So the only real limitation with this project is the amount of time that you have, and with enough time you can make an absolutely amazing game. But with this short amount of time that you have to create this project, make it as good as possible with the time that you have and walk away from it feeling proud. With this, let us move to our next step.